if you're someone that really can enjoy the hilarity of the way stuff is done here, and going through all those things, because you're either gonna have fun with that or you're gonna get angry. If you're somebody who really likes to have a very kind of hands-off approach to life and have your affairs kind of taken care of for you, you know, you hire the accountant for this and the lawyer for that and the gardener for this and this person, the dog walker for that, man, this is a tough place for that. Sure. This is a tough place for that. Well, it's good advice anywhere in the world, but just the US is so regulated and so standardized that you can do it less, but you really need to oversee your affairs. Like, you need to be hands-on.
Someone gave him the idea of donating bicycles during Christmas. So there was some kind of a fundraiser, people donated, and he was using recycled bicycle frames and fixing them. So he would put brand new tires, brand new wheels, brand new, stuff, brakes and gears and stuff like that, and repaint them and make them look really nice, almost like brand new bikes. They all look really like brand new bicycles. And then we went around and and gifted them to the kids that needed them. So there were 24 bicycles. There's something to be said about like either learning the language and learning the way to act or to behave or to speak, and almost like there's an Ecuadorian way to get your way.
Yeah.
No sea malito, and
a
like
cadence, a rhythm, a style to do all that.
You smile, you're friendly. Oh, por favor, ayúdame, no sea malito, necesito. And there's a way to do it where you get what you want. Whereas if you just show up and you're like waiting in line and you're not smiling, they're not going to attend you necessarily.
Hello and welcome back to the Ecuador Insider Podcast. Jesse, Carl, not joined today by Brandon, who is enjoying a little family time in the States. Shout out to Brandon. Hope you're enjoying the cold weather. Exactly, the snow up there in the Chicagoland area. Welcome back. Happy New Year. Merry Christmas. Happy 2024. Happy holidays. Not definitely not merry holidays. Happy holidays. Whatever you do or don't celebrate. Hope you guys are enjoying this time. We're recording here on January 2nd, so just wrapped up the New Year celebrations, although my New Year celebrations consisted of going to bed at like before 9 o'clock, I think, on New Year's Eve. But did you do something more exciting than me, or are you old like me?
Basically almost the same, I'll be honest. I had some calls with the family, back home, and we pretty uneventful. Otherwise, we didn't go out. We've gone out in previous years. It's pretty crazy what they do here in Ecuador. I mean, at least in our region, but I think it's pretty much the same everywhere. Everyone gets together into town square, all the way to midnight, and past midnight there's usually a band, loud music, and at midnight sharp they will, first of all, they make these effigies. So these monigotes, they represent somebody sometimes, so they'll stick someone's face on it. You've got Donald Trump and Biden and cartoon characters and others, but it could also be a family member. And so they make these dolls, they put them in a pile and light them on fire, and people jump around them, and the whole thing burns down around midnight. And that is to represent the burning of the old year and the renewing of the new year. So 2024, the new beginnings. So if you hold a grudge against somebody, or if there's some kind of family feud or whatever, you burn that, you let it go, and you start anew. So for the next year, that's what that represents. So we did not go this year. Also, they sell fireworks all around the street, so you'll hear fireworks. It sounds like gunshots everywhere. If you don't know what's going on, you could be a little scared. Car alarms turn on. The dogs and cats are running around, freaked out, and That's basically the New Year's here in Ecuador.
Sounds like you love that stuff, huh?
My son loves going out and cracking the firecrackers and stuff.
Of course.
So we've done that in previous years. Last year we had a retreat going on during New Year, so we had some fireworks and stuff of our own, and
yeah. Those traditions are funny. They're definitely different here. Like for a lot of the holidays, I think a lot of them. I mean, I don't know. I think some of the holidays have maybe been a little less commercialized here than back home. Mm. They still have a little bit of their meaning.
Sure.
Like we're celebrating Halloween back home, which has become to mean eat a bunch of sugar and like, I don't even know
Dress
what.
up as a zombie.
Yeah, right. And here they're doing, they're visiting the cemetery of their ancestors and doing like a whole thing around that.
Yes.
And, for us, it's Christmas, it's Santa coming down the chimney and leaving toys for the kids. I was trying to find a stocking in Loja, and they don't exist.
Interesting.
Like I even texted Milton, who was on our last pod. You can check that out. But Milton lives in Loja. I do not anymore. I live in Vilcabamba now, and so I haven't lived in Loja for like probably, I don't know, 5 years or 6 years or something. So I don't know it the way I used to. So he's kind of my go-to person for like little stupid stuff that I'm looking for, like where can I find this or that or whatever. And I'm asking him, he didn't even know what I was talking about.
Oh, yeah,
I had to send him a photo, and he even lived in the States for a little bit. So I figured if anyone, so they don't really do that here, which makes sense because they don't have chimneys either.
Yeah, it is interesting. You know where the stocking tradition comes from?
No idea.
It's interesting. I was looking that up a little bit. Comes from Saint Nicholas of Myra, who was a holy man, considered a saint in many Christian traditions, and apparently was a wealthy man, kind of renounced his wealth, and was helping families by putting gold in there where they would dry the socks on the chimney.
Okay.
And so he would he did that, and that's where the stocking tradition kind of came from Saint Nicholas, who became Santa Claus and all of that stuff.
Oh, that's cool. So yeah, so he wasn't coming down the chimney though, huh?
No, it was through the window actually.
Coming through the window.
They're like putting it through the window into the socks that were drying on the fireplace.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah.
But it's funny, they definitely, a lot of the things here, like for example, Christmas is a much bigger deal in the Western world than it is here. New Year's, it might be a bigger deal here than back home, but if not, it's at least a lot bigger than Christmas is here. So people really go hard on New Year's, they hang out. Christmas is more, it's almost like the whole month leading up to Christmas. People are doing the navideñas, the Christmas dinners, periodically leading up to Christmas, and then I think Christmas is really just kind of get together, hang out, open some gifts, do some family time.
In Ecuador?
Here, yeah.
I hear that they party hard though as well.
Oh, I'm sure. They party hard no matter what.
I saw a short video. I sent it to some Ecuadorians. They thought it was hilarious because it was comparing like U.S. Gringo Christmas to Ecuador or Latino Christmas. And the Gringo Christmas, everyone's like got their like Christmas shirts on, like with colorful stuff, and people are like eating dinner and opening gifts. It's all about the opening of the gifts the next day. Whereas the Latino, they show up at like 11 p.m. They're all wearing their like dancing attire, and they like drink a lot and party basically, and it's very different. It has nothing to do with the presents as much as it is in the West, anyways.
All different traditions they have. Anyways, I spent a Christmas, New Year's in Venezuela years ago. Many more fireworks for sure. Like that was like the whole week. It's like boom, 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 boom. So here you get a night of that, but that's about it. All right, so we're gonna, or actually, let's jump into some of that. Yeah. So you guys, I know we've done. We did some charity events again this year for Christmas.
For sure.
You and my wife, and I think your wife and others looked like a pretty good group. Were out there. Participating. So what was that like this year?
Yeah, it was awesome. No, there are two main things that it's on our YouTube channel. We'll put links in the description down below if you want to check it out. But first thing was Chino, who is the bicycle man in town. He's got the bicycle shop. He rents bicycles, fixes them, sells them. He's got electric bikes, mountain bikes, just a bunch of different things. And he's a real nice guy and very helpful. And someone gave him the idea of donating bicycles during Christmas. So there was some kind of a fundraiser, people donated, and he was using recycled bicycle frames and fixing them. So he would put brand new tires, brand new wheels, brand new, stuff, brakes and gears and stuff like that, and repaint them and make them look really nice, almost like brand new bikes. They all look really like brand new bicycles. And then we went around and and gifted them to the kids that needed them. So there were 24 bicycles that were donated that day. Unfortunately, there were a lot more children that need bicycles. So, but yeah, so we want to continue. I'm partnering with him. We're partnering with him. The next one will be Dia de los Niños or Dia del Niño. We'll do another event like that. So, but it was really beautiful. It was really fun. We actually showed up at this little elementary school in Sahuayco, about 45, 50 minutes from here in the countryside, kind of at the end of the road, let's say, outside of Kinara. And we show up there and they didn't know. It was a surprise. They didn't know we were coming to give bikes. Only one of the teachers knew. So we all show up and we had, a pretty big crew because there was multiple people. Ecuavisas was actually out there, which is one of the biggest news channel. They're supposed to be doing an episode. I haven't seen it yet, but They
It's
interviewed
a
some
television
of us and stuff.
channel, focused on news.
Yeah. So anyways, the point is we show up and these little girls, there were seven kids in that school, and they were doing a Christmas presentation, and it kind of ties into like the differences, I thought it was beautiful. They started dancing, they started singing these Christmas carols, which are very different. The Christmas carols, I don't know if you've heard them, but it doesn't sound anything like our Christmas carols. It's almost sounds like indigenous. It's got like the indigenous groove and tempo and beat and music. And and yeah, I mean, I guess part of this was the whole message, basically. You know how we like do Christmas with like Santa Claus and like the whole commercial thing. The whole message of their presentation, which I thought was beautiful, was to remember that Christmas is about the birth of Christ and about the reasons why we celebrate. The reason why we celebrate is not about gifts and Santa Claus and all of that stuff. It's really about the true origin of Christmas, which I thought was really nice. And so yeah, we gave them the bicycles. They were all extremely excited, super surprised. One thing I thought was beautiful about it as well, which I love, it kind of ties into the cultural thing. It's like we had a handful of bikes. We had like 7, 8 bikes for them, right? And they were all different colors. Some of them, they were mostly girls actually, and some of them had more boy colors, and there were different sizes and all that. And Chino was trying to match the best bike with the child, but I feel like where I'm from, the kids would have been fighting for their favorite one,
sure.
right? They would have been like, no, I want that one. And like, it could have created some commotion. These girls, these Ecuadorian kids, they were just so stoked to be getting a bicycle. They didn't care the color. It was black, and green, and the little girl was wearing a pink dress, and she didn't care about the color at all or anything. They were just so happy to be getting a bicycle. And so I think that is a cultural difference. People here are very satisfied with what they have, and probably they don't compare as much than we do, let's say. So that was really nice. So that was the first one. And then on Monday, on Christmas Day, the 25th, we did a similar thing. We went to similar areas, but we delivered candies. So they do this thing here called caramelos. It's like little bags of various candies and cookies and, little colorful bags of treats. And so we gave those, as well as some toys for the children. And we also gave rice. We had these bags, 3 pounds rice bags that we gave to some people. And yeah, it was really nice. We had an American family that joined us, Nathan and his family, his children. They enjoyed it as well. And your wife came out, my wife as well. Your wife's cousin, I believe, was here.
Yep,
She's still here?
No.
Yeah, so that was really nice. We had 2 pickup trucks, and we had 20 people split in 2 trucks, nice. Which means we had, of course, a lot of kids in the back of the truck. And yeah, that was great. Really, really enjoyable.
Yeah. No, that's, the story or the anecdote you mentioned about some of the cultural stuff is really it's really what I love best about this country, are those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. There's just sort of like a craziness and an on-edgeness that we have in our culture, where we come from, that they just tend to not have here. Mm-hmm. And it just makes, people here tend to be very human, very kind, very humble, very helpful. Common sense rules the day. It's very like the interactions are very person to person, human to human. Mm-hmm. They're not crazy. Like, they're not either crazy for rules or crazy for sort of these unspoken cultural norms that have to be kept up with, or crazy for like the materialistic stuff, kind of like you were mentioning, mm-hmm. or crazy to be the toughest or the coolest or the this or the that, or right. It's a culture. It's a place that's pretty homogeneous society, obviously, right? Like, the people who have been living here for hundreds of years. It's not a super mobile society, up until recently. So most families, wherever they live, go back many, 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 many generations. Mm-hmm. And it's just a much more peaceful kind of vibe in that way. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a great example, because my kids also would have been, yeah. Crying over which one they want, and he gets the one I wanted, and all that sure. nonsense. And,
yeah, for sure. And another aspect of that too is, it's very obvious when you go there that these people have very little, right? The school is extremely basic. I was looking at the architecture and how they built the school like as the cheap as they could build it, basically, the school room. And right, we go there, and we give them bicycles, and then they start talking to each other like, hey, we got to give them something back, right? So then they put together this dessert. they had cheese and they had panela, so they made quesillo con panela, right? And they're like, oh, come, we'll invite you for some typical dessert that we make here. So with cheese that's made in the region there as well, and the panela, of course, is the cane sugar. So it's basically very young cheese. I think quesillo is made in a day or two.
Yeah,
basically. It's very, it's almost like very spongy.
Well, and the fresher it is, the better. Like I don't know if you've ever interrupt you for 3 seconds, but I one time had the great joy of getting to eat some of that quesillo, like a couple hours after it was made.
Okay.
And it's like, I don't really like quesillo. Like I don't really like it. Like they use it mostly in soups and things like that. And like I don't really like it. We don't buy it or anything.
Yeah.
The fresh is, I mean, it's incredible. It's
Nice.
like the milk squirting out, and it's almost like an amazing fresh mozzarella or something.
Okay. Yeah, no, I like it. I mean, we don't buy it a lot, but it's the most widely available cheese here. It's the cheapest, and like you said, it's made, I think, in one day or very, very quickly, right? It's not aged. So they chop up the cheese in blocks, and then they pour some kind of hot sugar syrup, on top of it, and that's the dessert. And yeah, it was great. We got to enjoy that with them, and it was a very beautiful moment for sure. The local people, the mothers and the parents were very grateful as well, and it's nice. So we want to keep doing that. Of course, I think part of this is, we live in the countryside. There's cycling is something that will never run out of style. You can bike everywhere, go to the river. There's trails, there's mountains, there's waterfalls, and some of the children here don't have bicycles. They can't afford it potentially. So I think if we can continue to do that, we can, change lives to some extent. So I'm excited about it.
Yep. All right, guys, if you're enjoying this content, take a moment right now, please hit like on this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell as well so you're notified when new content comes out. Should I move to Ecuador? See, I think it's a never. I think looking at the camera is a never, bro. I'm going back to you. Should I move to Ecuador in 2024? So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. Obviously, we're into the new year. We're into 2024. Unbelievable. The numbers just get stranger and stranger. Remember when no, you probably don't remember actually when the world was going to end in 2000.
I heard about it.
What did they have? It was like I don't remember, but
the system's going to shut down.
Yeah.
The bug.
The bug or something, like, some electronic. But we survived that as well.
We made it.
And
we made it through 2012.
And we made it through
the
2012.
End of the Mayan calendar.
Yeah. And so, if you're someone, if you're thinking about a place like Ecuador, I think there's a lot of good reasons and a lot of bad reasons to do so. I've been here since 2013. You've been here since 2011 or 12. So we've been here a long time. We're in a community that sees a lot. It's a fairly transitory community that we live in. Like, if you're talking to someone that's lived here for even 5 years, that's kind of a lot. 10 years is kind of a lot. If you're talking to someone who's been here 15, 20 years, it's almost surprising. You're like, oh, really? You've been here that long? Like, because there's not that many people, that have made their home here since much before us, right? Like,
very true.
So, and it's a little bit of a touristy area. Like, it's on the map, right? So you get people who are like traveling Latin America, who hit this town. You get a lot of backpackers, you get folks in vans, you get bicyclists, a lot of cool people, a lot of cool stories. And you just have a lot of travelers. It's really an interesting town, right? You have a lot of travelers. They tend to be mostly Latinos, but also foreigners too. But you'll get a lot of travelers that have some kind of craft. Maybe it's massage, maybe it's jewelry, maybe it's clothing, maybe it's artisanal, this or that or the other thing, food products. That'll kind of come and live here for, they don't know how long. They might be here 3 months, 6 months. They might be here 2 years, 5 years. You'll see them a lot of times come and go as well, right? You'll see a lot of people that live here for 2-3 years. Then you won't see them for a year. Then you'll see them again. They're back for a year. It's kind of a community like that. And so we've seen a lot of people come and go, right? Over the course of our 20 whatever years here, we've seen a lot of people come and go. And we've seen a lot, I've been in this business since 2013, really. We launched in January of 14. So I've been directly involved as well, as have you now for a few years, in terms of foreign families, foreign people coming. You see how excited they are when you first talk to them versus how they feel after arrival versus how they feel 6 months later versus how they feel 6 months later, and all.
Yep.
You know, we've seen that now. We have a lot of experience in that stuff.
Yep.
So
10-year anniversary, January, right?
That's
10-year
right.
anniversary.
That's right.
Let's celebrate.
We got to celebrate.
Why not?
Get some of that sweet wine and.
Some of that guarapo con piquete.
That's better. That would be better.
That's yeah. Go ahead.
So like, what are? Gosh, it's such an interesting. I think when you're talking about this conversation at all, like moving to Ecuador, period, or anywhere. I think for me it's important. For me, it makes sense to split out right at the beginning, because otherwise I'll just keep coming back to this theme over and over again. Is whether you're doing it because you're excited about something and you're passionate and you're motivated, or you're doing it out of fear. Yeah. I would say right away that splits people already. Like from my observations, the people who are running from something as opposed to running to something have much worse outcomes. Now, this is all just my observation. It's not, I don't know if this would be statistically significant or not, but that's certainly been my observation. So people who come and you kind of talk to them and they have that real sort of fear in the way that they communicate, and they're worried, they're really worried. And some of these things are important issues that we talk about, that we think about too. I'm not saying that you can't, know what's going on or think about things, but they're really worried about the dollar, or they're really worried about the state of the U.S., or they're really worried about X, Y, or Z, thing. And what I've noticed is that people who seem to come down in that sort of, that sort of state, often fail. Like often they just don't make it here. And I think, I think if I had, like, from my perspective, it's because they attract that to them, so they come down fearful, and then they get involved in all those fearful kind of things that you can do here if you so choose. You can do anywhere if you so choose. And then they start reading into things that sort of confirm their own fears. And maybe it would be even worse, but maybe they even convince themselves that this was some sort of panacea, some sort of solution for, everything, which it's not at all. It's
right.
It's a place to live, it's a
yes.
location on Earth. Like,
yep.
and so then it's like, well, as an expat, when you come here, you start bumping up against things right away. You're trying to figure out your immigration stuff. How do I get my license? How do I buy a car? How do I rent a house? Maybe you're looking for property. You start, going through all those processes. Who are my friends going to be? What are my kids going to be doing? How, am I going to be safe? Like, where's my food coming from? What's my social life look like? What is logistically just getting things, and, all that kind of stuff, right? So for all of that to go well, you kind of have to have a good attitude, through that, right? You kind of have to, like, enjoy some of those experiences that you're going to have that are going to be confusing and not off-putting maybe, but just different. They're very new, very different, while you're figuring out, how does life work here? How do the people think? How do they look at the world? How do they run their lives? How do they interact with each other? What do I actually have to be concerned about, and not at all? You're also going to be in the process during that time of, like, perhaps, unless you've lived in other places and already done this, but of maybe busting down stereotypes that you have in your head about Latin America, about this, about that. So there's going to be a lot going on. So I think that sort of, like, are you really excited because you're inspired to go buy a piece of land and start a fruit farm, or or do a coffee plantation, or start a community, or just live amongst folks who maybe are more like-minded to you, or or whatever your reasons are that you're excited about. Maybe it's as simple as the weather. Maybe it's as simple as, like, well, I want a relaxed lifestyle where I can grow some food and enjoy the weather and relax on my patio and not have to worry about the crazy expense of where I live. And it could be as simple as that.
Yep.
That's fine. Like, I think that's a totally valid reason to come here. But those reasons, as opposed to, oh my God, everything's gonna collapse, I gotta get out of here, if I don't get out of here. People have been thinking this forever, when I first started figuring stuff out in 2010, 11, I was leaving the US in I was getting ready to leave the US in 2012 because I was worried about the dollar.
Right, yeah, of course.
I was worried about credit markets and things like that, right? Now I'm 10 plus years, over 10 and a half years into Ecuador, and people are still leaving the US
For the same
thinking
reason.
for the same reasons, fast,
Yeah.
like the same speed that I was then, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And so I don't know, I see like those folks from my experience, I see them, they tend to be here for 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, and they leave, or they're just unhappy. Or I just see like they come and kind of create the same fearful world that maybe they feel like they were leaving, or things like that. So anyways, I don't know. I wanted to sort of preface it that way. I don't know if you have thoughts.
No, for sure. I think those are really good points, and it would be you can call it natural law, you can call it law of attraction, you can call it whatever you want, but you kind of how you behave and how you live and how you think in the world, you're going to end up creating situations for yourself that could be positive or negative depending on your attitude, and also, right, your attitude of how you perceive a situation. You could turn something that's quote unquote negative into a blessing and a learning experience as well. There's no perfect place in the world, right? There's no perfect place in the world. The grass is always greener. That's an interesting expression that I think is so true, right?
Yeah.
Wherever we live, we always look like, it would be nice to be right over there, right? It might be a little better over there. But yeah, people that are coming here thinking that this will solve all of their problems, that's not going to happen. Like, there's no way. You're going to, for all the reasons you've stated, when you come here, you're going to bump into a lot of challenges, or into a lot of learning curves, into a lot of, what's the word? Your, I want to use the right word, your perception, or your, anyways, it's going to change. You're going to have to change your mindset. You're going to have to change your mindset, and basically, if you are someone who's very fearful, there's a lot of things to be afraid of, right? You don't speak the language. You don't know what people are saying, maybe. You don't know what they're thinking. It's a new culture. There's all the, scary headlines and stuff, international headlines about Ecuador in general. It's good to have to be street smart as well, of course. But I think if you come here with a positive attitude of like, you're making a trade-off, right? You're leaving something that you have behind, but you're gaining a lot of things that you don't have back home that you're going to have here, right? So, but it is a trade-off. There's things that are not available here that you're going to miss potentially, right? There's things that are different, of course. But at the end of the day, if you come here with a positive attitude of like, I'm going to learn the language, I'm going to learn the culture, I'm going to immerse, I'm going to see things in a positive light, right? And if there are challenges, for me, like growing up in a way, I spent my 20s in Ecuador. I came here when I was 20 years old, so I've kind of learned the Ecuadorian way in a way, right? And I think, when I go back home, let's say, I'm almost like even more street smart than I was when I was in Canada in some ways, right? Because I've learned a different way to live in a way. So anyways, I think those are really good points. So Ecuador is not for everyone, but if you come here excited about trying something new, about learning a new way of living, about great weather, low cost of living, good community, and all of that good stuff, you can make it here and have a great life.
Yeah.
Which is, I wouldn't see me and my family living anywhere else, really. Like, I think this place is amazing, but there are a lot of people who come here and they're escaping something, and they come here and they're, focusing on all the things that are wrong, and eventually they decide to leave because, it's just not for them.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you kind of...
Paradigm shift is the word I was looking for. It's a paradigm shift to come here, right? It's so different that you have to change your paradigm. You have to look at things differently, for sure.
Big time.
Yeah.
And just being here over time forces you to do that. Like, you don't have a choice. If you're going to live here successfully over the long term, you're going to start to think like people think here, which is a paradigm shift.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think I think a lot of sort of should I move to Ecuador in 2024? I think, and again, we're saying Ecuador, we're probably talking more about this region, because moving to Quito or moving to, let's say, a gated community in Manta or a gated community elsewhere on the coast, or some of the other, maybe Baño, maybe some other areas might be a little more similar to this, but there's some experiences you could have moving here that maybe some of this wouldn't apply because it'd be more like anywhere else in the world, right?
Sure.
If you're, Quito is a multi-million person city with international everything, it's going to be, right. But in terms of, should I move to Ecuador? I think partly the framing of the answer, or the framing of that question, which then informs the answer, is, how important, how good are you, and how much fun is it for you to roll with the punches, learn new stuff, have a new adventure, and treat life that way? Because there's a lot of characteristics here that I think make for a fun playground for a human, right? Like,
Yep.
Again, we've gone over this list 10,000 times. I'm not going to bore people, but just in terms of the fact that it's never cold and the people are great and the nature is so abundant and incredible, and just sort of the simplicity and sort of just the beauty of life here and the beauty of the people in the country and all this kind of stuff. It could be an amazing place to live if you're someone that really can enjoy the hilarity of the way stuff is done here,
Yep.
and going through all those things, because you're either going to have fun with that or you're going to get angry. And one of the sort of no-nos here is getting angry, right? Like, culturally, people here don't express anger to one another. They don't call each other up and yell. They don't yell at the guy because he showed up late to fix the cable box. There's nobody's doing any of that here. But I've seen a lot of people come, not have the right attitude, and then their world gets dark very quickly because nothing's working. The guy said he was going to show up on Tuesday and he didn't show up, and they told me this thing and it turned out it's this other way, and and each thing is just making me angrier and angrier.
Yep.
Because I want things the way I want them, and it's totally understandable, right? But the U.S. is a better place for someone like that, because most of those things are relatively orderly, they're relatively organized, they're regulated. You can complain to someone if things go wrong. Here, like, you kind of have to say to yourself, the safety net of the government and all the institutions and all the stuff not really there.
Sure.
The way I'm going to live my life is person to person in my community, interacting, people, reputation, and all that kind of stuff, and relationships and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And that is an adjustment.
Yep.
Like if you're looking for a power tool, you might not go to the store. You might text a couple of friends who have connections in that industry or whatever, and be like, hey, I'm looking for this and that, and they might say, oh yeah, call this guy.
Yeah.
And you might like make a couple of phone calls to buy a power tool as opposed to heading to the Home Depot or something.
Sure.
That's very different, right? And it could be overwhelming even.
Yes.
If it's like, if you're not comfortable kind of. So I think a lot of that attitude stuff for me is critical as to whether you should pull the trigger or not, because I've definitely seen a lot of people kind of talk themselves into it, like talk themselves into the fantasy of, hey, look, there's these guys and there's these mountains and it sounds great, and and I've heard good things because Ecuador gets, up until recently anyway, was getting pretty good press.
Yep.
And I'm an adventurous person and I can handle it, and off they go. And the reality of the difference, I think sometimes smacks people in the face, and people might have thought they were willing to do things the other way, but as it turned out, that was too much, right? And then people will start to, I'll hear opinions that, like, to me are shocking sometimes. I've heard occasionally, this is not frequent at all, but I've heard foreigners, for example, say, like, oh, Ecuadorians, they don't like gringos, they won't help us with anything, they're, And like I'm sitting there like this, wow, like this is the most helpful culture I've ever experienced in my life. You know, I've never I haven't traveled all over the world, but I've never been to a place in the world where people are so willing to help you with anything. Like it's amazing, right?
Yeah.
How incredibly kind and helpful people are. But I've heard people come to those kinds of conclusions, and it's like I know why. It's very simple. It's not even their fault. Like it's as simple as stuff's really different here.
Yeah.
And if you don't know how to go about it, you're going to bump into not accomplishing what you're trying to accomplish all the time.
Yeah.
Just by going about it wrong.
Yep.
And then the mind is going to then use that to confirm whatever your maybe fears are, doubts or beliefs or whatever.
Yep.
So in this case, it's like, oh, they don't like me because I'm from somewhere else
Sure,
or something
sure.
or whatever. But anyways, yeah.
Yeah, no, those are really good points. It is very different here. Sometimes I forget, because we've gotten so used to how things are done here. Like for me to, find somebody on WhatsApp and give them a call to ask them about something, like that's very normal and super easy. It's easier than driving 45 minutes to Loja and trying to find something, right? If you can just call somebody and they can ship it through the bus or whatever.
Right.
There's just, the way things are done here. And there's something to be said about like either learning the language and learning the way to act or to behave or to speak almost. Like there's an Ecuadorian way to get your way.
Yeah.
No sea malito.
A
And like
cadence, a rhythm, a style to do all that. Yep.
You smile and you're friendly. Oh, por favor, ayúdame, no sea malito, necesito. And there's a way to do it where you get what you want. Whereas if you just show up and you're like waiting in line and you're not smiling, they're not going to attend to you necessarily, right? Like there's just a way to behave here that will get you what you want in a way. And so like you're completely right. Ecuadorians are extremely friendly and helpful to me because they also see me as a valuable asset in the community. I can give them work. I know people. There's many reasons why they would want to help us because they think maybe we're valuable. We're actually valuable to them. But yeah, if you're coming, and you're angry at them or you give a bad first impression, then maybe you kind of burn some bridges as well, right? So that can happen. And another thing too, I wanted to jump in because we don't want to also downplay like. Some people came here and trusted everybody and got burnt.
Yep.
People gotten taken advantage of. Like that does happen, and it happens. I would say not quite often, but it's not an uncommon thing where if you just trust people, you don't read documents, you don't, you just trust everybody. Like some people will take advantage of that definitely. So that's another thing to also be wary of, and be careful of, is to trust the right people. Always ask for second opinions. Always go through your network and ask for people's recommendations, and don't just trust people at face value.
Yeah, double check.
Double check, right, exactly. So that's important, definitely, to do here. And maybe that's something you wouldn't necessarily do in the States, right?
Much less.
Much
it's
less.
much less necessary. Yeah, and I mean, and that leads into another great one, which we've talked about before, but, I think I would think twice about moving here if you're somebody who really likes to have a very kind of hands-off approach to life and have your affairs kind of taken care of for you. You hire the accountant for this and the lawyer for that and the gardener for this and the dog walker for that. And, you kind of keep your life relatively simple and hassle-free, and you hire. Man, this is a tough place for that. Sure. This is a tough place for that. Like, you could set that up for yourself here actually pretty easily, but it's not going to be through companies. It's going to be through people.
Yes.
So you're going to find the lady who you love, who you get along good with, who's going to come and help you cook and clean every day. You're going to find the guy who's going to come, do your landscaping, who you get along with and you trust. And you can find, you'll find all those people if you want to set your life up that way. But, you can do it. But the name of the game in Ecuador, and I'm sure this is true of all of Latin America, probably most of the world. Well, it's good advice anywhere in the world, but just the U.S. is so regulated and so standardized that you can do it less. But you really need to oversee your affairs. Like, you need to be hands-on with everything you're doing. Which is a frustration. Like, that's a frustration of mine, especially in business, because you have such a harder time in business getting to scale in Ecuador because it's so much more difficult setting things up so that they're semi-hands-off, semi-automated, sort of standardized. And so, you spend your life here personally involved in everything you're doing. So you got to be aware of that, and you got to be willing to do that. Like you've got to be willing to like, you know, you set up an appointment for the internet people to come, and they didn't come. Now what? You know, well, probably you're, you know, unless you know, like if me or you, we know the owner, we're just gonna send them a text. That's no problem. But if you're new here and you don't know us to say, hey, can you help us with this? Your best bet is probably to go to the office, which is 2 minutes away. Like it's no big deal. But your best bet is probably to go there and just remind them.
Sure.
Not angry. Like, hey, I had this appointment. And probably they're going to tell you, like, they're just going to tell you, you know, oh, they're out, they're going to call you, this or that. There's just going to be some story, but which is fine. And it's an honest story, by the way. They're not lying to you at all. They're just telling you, like, they're just dealing with you. But that's probably, you know, your best way to handle it. Whereas think about the, you know, you handle that the U.S. way, you could get pretty frustrated, right? So the U.S. way would be to call the company and yell at them basically and be like, you know, you guys didn't show up and you're supposed to show up, and they're going to make you another appointment and you're going to go through this whole like process. But here that's going to be in Spanish. It's not going to, there isn't going to be a whole setup way to do it. So it's just person to person. You know, like after the technical comes to your house, you might have his number after that, and you might not even need to call the company. You might just be texting your boy, you know, who comes to hook you up. But
No, that's I have an anecdote similar to that mistake that I've made a week ago, let's say. I won't mention who, but there's a mechanic that I use, and he did some work on some of my vehicles some months back, but this last year. And every time he'd done some work, I would ask for a receipt, a factura, which is, you know, basically a receipt, and it helps at the end of the year for the taxes and all that, right? So I asked him for a factura the first time. He's like, send me your information, I'll give you a factura. I sent him, he never gives me the factura. Then I get some more work done. He's like, oh yeah, send me your info. He already had it, but I sent him again, never gave me the factura, and now it's almost January 1st, so my accountant's like, hey, we need as many receipts for all the year as possible. We're about to do the whole thing. So then I call him and I said, hey, could you give me that factura? And he's like, oh, but that's a long time ago, and you know, you never asked me. Like, he starts making excuses for why he didn't do it. And I kind of got mad at him. Like, dude, look, the text, like, I'll send you the text. Like, I asked you 3 times to give me those facturas, and then I don't hear from him. He doesn't answer calls, doesn't answer any text, just ghosts me, right? And so that, you know, and he could just do that if he wanted, I guess. I don't know, I could go after him maybe in some ways legally, but
no one ever would do that.
No one would ever do that. But it's just, that's not the way you do things here. I got mad at him, and then, you know, he just stopped talking to me for a few days. And then I literally had to call a friend who I know gets his car fixed there. And I said, hey, could you do me a favor? Could you call the mechanics and just say, hey, Carl needs his factura, could you help him out? Because I knew they had a good relationship. And so he did. And I got my receipt.
That's great.
I got my factura. But yeah, getting mad was just a bad reaction. And so that definitely, in most cases, a no-no. Now, calling people out in a nice way almost is good. Like calling people out, not angry, but showing them that they made a mistake, and just they usually are humble enough to be like, oh yeah, that's right, yeah, I messed up.
Totally.
Yeah.
But that's an art form, right?
Because an art form.
I think this is actually a great example that you just brought up, because that is, so you didn't pick up on what I refer to as the Ecuadorian no. Right? So he was telling you, no, I'm not giving you the factura, but you weren't picking up on it, because he's not going to tell you no. He's going to say yes while giving you indications that he's not going to do it.
That's funny.
He gave them to you. You wanted the factura.
Yeah.
So then you did what we do in our culture, which is to get upset, right? You get someone's kind of jerking you around, you know, kind of screwing around. So you get upset, and then that's it. Yeah. At that point, you've ruined the relationship unless you fix it, which you can fix it. But like culturally here, that's just not, you can't, you get visibly angry, visibly upset, you get frustrated, you talk to someone in a nasty way or accuse them of something, that's it. Like they'll never, you know, even if they work in a government institution, like you're not gonna, they're not gonna help you ever again, ever, unless you go in there humbly and fix it, which you can do. And then the other point that you made to that, that's right. I think this illustrates exactly what I was trying to say so well, in terms of like, it's all human to human here. Like you're not gonna go in there and being like, if you don't give me this, I'm gonna, like there's none of that going on, right? You're dealing with a guy, he's got his set of stuff, you've got your set of stuff, and you guys gotta make music together, and it's gotta, you know, you have to find a way for that to work. And a lot of that is cajoling, and smiling and innuendo and picking up on the subtle communication of when they're actually saying no. Because like when someone doesn't, if I would have been in that situation, right, I would have known. I'm not saying you didn't. I'm just saying for me, I would have known pretty quickly. I'd be like, he doesn't want to give this to me.
Yeah.
Right. And so then I would have had a choice to make. Am I going to go and try to find out why and cajole him into giving it to me, or do I give up? Like those would have been my two choices. And right, if I was going to go try to cajole him, it wouldn't have been super simple, because if I didn't leave it in my hand, I probably wasn't going to get it either. So it would have had to been like, bro, like, what's up, man? Like, you're worried about the taxes, or like, what's the issue, or like, and have a conversation. It's like, because I really need it for these things. Like, can we work this out? Like, right? Like, you'd have to.
I assumed in his case, like most people, the guy's really busy. He's got a successful mechanic, and so he's a busy guy. But most foreigners don't ask for facturas, because most foreigners don't declare taxes here. So a lot of these businesses, they don't give a lot of facturas, so they can afford to give them here and there, because most people don't ask for them, right? And they buy so many parts and replacement parts and stuff that they probably don't. They probably have more expenses than income, actually, sometimes. So sometimes they need to give facturas because they have more expenses than income. So I assumed he was cool with it, and he did eventually give it to me. And his reason that he gave my friend was that he doesn't know how to do it himself. He has to hire this accountant guy who does it online, and it's all electronic. And
probably true.
So
it was just a pain in the. It was just pain for him.
He can't do it. It's somebody else, and basically. But anyways, But it's a good point though. There's the Ecuadorian no. It's like, sí, claro, puede ser. That's funny. And I think part of this too, like, and I mentioned that earlier, but it's important, if you're not going to learn the language well and the cultural stuff, to find someone else that you trust that can be that person for you, that can represent you in those situations. Like, some people here have, almost adopted an Ecuadorian person, an Ecuadorian family, into like, this is our guy, this is our, concierge, he deals with all of our affairs, and then you send them. A lot of foreigners, actually, when there's Junta de Agua meetings and there's, some canal water meetings, they'll send the gardener, they'll send somebody else, because it's all in Spanish, and they don't want to sit there for 3-4 hours. And apparently it's, I've never been to any of those meetings, but apparently they last for hours, and it's like people are just repeating the same thing 10 times. Like, someone just says in a different way, but the exact same thing is just being said over and over. And that's an Ecuadorian thing as well, right? When you go to these meetings, people just start prefacing the whole thing, and then someone just goes and says almost the same exact thing, and you already heard it before in the phone conversation, but they have to say it again in the meeting.
And everything always is in person.
Yes, that's right.
Which is changing a little bit. That's even changed in the 10 years, 11 years, whatever I've been here. Like, that's actually changed 30%. But still, for the most part, most things are done in person, which I've gotten used to and love at this point. Like, absolutely love. And that's the other thing, right? Is like, for the type of person I am, this place is perfect, right? Like, I always railed against authority, right? I was always the rebellious type. I always never liked petty rules and petty regulations, and it has to be this way, and no running next to the pool, and all this crap, right? And they just don't really have any of that here, right? This is just a culture that doesn't really, like, there's a few things here and there, of course. There's still cities, there's still government, there's still, but culturally, it's not a place that has all those things, and there's a lot of leeway, there's a lot of room in anything you're doing. So as long as you maintain a good attitude and you stay friendly and positive, and you go with the flow, and you just let the processes play out. Like, it's very hard to do. You got to let go of control, like, a lot, right?
Yes,
which is
right.
difficult. But here, the key to success is both paying attention and just letting it play out. Like, not at all jumping in and being like, stop, and I know, and I'm going to fire you and hire you and do this and do that. Like very rarely does that help. 99% of the time, whatever process you're involved in, that's in a quagmire, and that happens here. It is moving forward. Again, there's some fraudsters, there's some guys who just drop the ball, and that's why, again, paying attention is important.
Yes, right.
But 99% of the time, when there seems like there's absurd delays and you just can't understand why, and Monday it was this, and Tuesday it was this, and Wednesday it turned into this, and Thursday it turned into that, 99% of the time, I think that's probably an accurate number. Like if that number's wrong, it's 92%, but like it's not lower than that.
Sure.
Percent of the time, there are very real and okay reasons why those things are happening. And the more involved you get at those critical moments, the less likely they are to complete well. And your best bet at that moment is to check in and then step back.
Sure.
And then if it ever gets to the point where you're just like, there has to be something else going on here, then great, then go or send someone or deal with it. But yeah, like that sort of let go, like pay attention and then just let it play out, because things have a way of resolving. They have a way of getting to the finish line, but getting there can be a very strange, long and winding road. Yep. Where none of the government agencies are agreeing with each other. They're all giving you different prerequisites. They're all giving you different stories. Mm-hmm. They changed this, they changed that. Now they need this other thing. This happened, that happened, whatever. Like it's just stuff's going on. As long as the person you're working with is trustworthy and they're working on it, yep, they'll get there. As long as you don't screw up the process.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, that's a good point. And I guess part of this too is, sometimes you hear a really good recommendation for a certain professional, and then someone else had a horror story with the same person, right? Sure. And you're like, well, what's wrong, right? And I think a lot of it has to do with those unforeseen things that are out of the control of the professional. And it's like they're doing their best, but the government just changed, and there's delays, and they've changed the rule, or now the paperwork's only valid for 60 days. It used to be 90 days, so now this creates an issue, and those types of things. Because I think that's something to keep in mind. There are delays a lot of times in Ecuador.
Oh, yeah.
And it is wise to check in, say, hey, how are we doing with this? What can I do to help? And if they're like, it's all good, it's on its way, then you just wait a little bit.
Yeah, or even if the story makes sense.
Right.
Like as long as what they're telling you makes sense.
Sure.
Like, well, we did this and we did this, and then it got bogged down here, and now we have to get this from over here, and we're working on that. Like as long as as long as you can tell that they're working on it. That and again, they've come recommended, so you trust them.
Sure.
It's kind of the best.
Another thing that I've done before too is if there was some kind of issue, I would try to loop in somebody else that is, let's say, well known in the community or has a good reputation, and say, hey, could you do me a favor? I could pay you for your time. Could you call this person and ask them to explain to you why this is taking longer or whatever? And usually, if they speak to someone that's an Ecuadorian, let's say, speaks to another Ecuadorian who they know what's up, like you might not know what's going on, but they definitely do. So they won't be as likely to make some false story if they talk to one of their own, I guess, right?
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Like I use that all the time. Like the social weight here matters so much that anybody you're doing anything with will do a little bit better if they have a personal connection with you, which 9 times out of 10, or very often might be a mutual friend or a mutual acquaintance or somebody that that can add that sort of pressure or that weight of the familial connection or the personal connection. Goes a really long way here. Definitely. So yeah, like the few times, and this does not happen to me often, but the few times I've gotten to the point with someone where I'm ready to either take their head off or give up. And I know I'm not allowed to take their head off, right? So I'm fighting that urge, where I'm ready to either take their head off or give up. That's the route I've gone. Yeah. I've been like, all right, I got to find someone else who can talk to them, who I can explain the situation to, is not as angry as I am in this moment, and can find out and tell me if I'm being screwed with or not, right? Yeah. Yeah. And 9 times out of 10, again, no one's screwing with me at all. Yep. Maybe I pissed them off, or maybe something happened, or maybe it's just as simple as a document took longer to get, or most of the time it's not.
Yeah. Yeah, and part of it too is some of the good reputable professionals here, they get really busy. Yeah. They get too much business in a way, and sometimes they take a while to respond because they've just got so much going on. And like you said, sometimes it can be challenging for businesses to scale. So it seems like some very reputable professionals, they don't scale very quickly, or they don't scale at all sometimes. They just got too much work, really.
Yeah, I think that happens a lot. And then there's also just a very large difference, I would argue, like in expectations. In this culture, you're not expecting to be updated all the time and to be kept in the loop and to be given, this, that detail, and to be prepared ahead of time. Like, people just don't really do any of that here, which again works for me, right? Like, I was always a last minute person. I was always kind of, up against the deadline type of person. So it works for me, but it might not work for everybody, right?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of that is just expectation. Sometimes for us, if we're hiring, like examples you give, I'm thinking of shipping containers, I'm thinking of visa processor people and things like. If you're hiring someone like that, and you're in the U.S. or you're in Canada, you're kind of expecting, like, you hire them and then they send you a this, and it lays out all the steps and it tells you what to do, and they're at this date we're doing this and this date we're doing that, and like they're not doing any of that here.
Right.
And so a lot of that, I think, is just expectations, and kind of goes back to our earlier conversation of just knowing how to go about making sure that the outcome happens, getting your answers and making sure the outcome happens, which is much more of a dance, much more of an art form than it is back home.
Yep.
All right. Did we do it?
Are you wanting to move to Ecuador after this episode?
Yeah, I mean, if you talk about some of that stuff, right, it's like, this country does offer a canvas where many of your dreams probably, you can do them here. Like, if you have dreams of self-sufficiency, self-sustainability, or community type stuff, or just having your food be direct to your plate, or water and food and nature, and not having to worry about cold, and you have projects off of that you're excited about, whatever you're going to do, an animal sanctuary, like whatever you're into. This is a great place for all of that stuff, right? It's an amazing place to do things like that. What could get in the way is like some of this stuff we're talking about, right? So I think, if you're excited about stuff like that, like, get excited about Ecuador. Absolutely, this place is amazing. But understand these things so it doesn't, you don't waste 2 years of your life and then. For sure. Some of the ideas you just threw, I wanted to jump into a few of the things that I've heard that people are talking about recently. This is just totally, it hasn't even started, but someone had this idea of creating an artificial lake around here. Oh, that would be awesome. I mean, there's one in Vilcabamba, a small one. You can actually, that's right. Like a little pond. You can paddle boat, you can kayak on it, but it's pretty small. There's a few people that have them, but like an actual big project of like buying 2-3 hectares of sugarcane field and like diverting the river and turning it, having a beach and a restaurant and all that stuff, that would be epic. That would be amazing. I would love to. If someone's into that, if someone has any knowledge or would like to do something like that, that would be definitely something that's sort of missing here in a way, right? You can go to the river, you can't really like go for a swim, you can go for a dip, right? So there's that. There's talks, and this is kind of on the down low as well, but there's talks of opening a really nice, modern, nice gym in Vilcabamba. There's people that have been talking about this, and there's it looks like it's probably going to happen at this point. So that's really exciting. Nice. I'm excited about it. I've been to Baños, northern Ecuador, Baños de Ambato. The tourism there is like unbelievable. Yeah. There's like thousands of tourists a day almost that go through it, right? Vilcabamba has a lot of the similar attributes than Baños. It's actually, the weather's better here, really. It rains a lot less. And there's not that much, you can hike Mandango, you can go to the waterfall, there's horseback rides, there's trails on the river, but you don't have zip lines everywhere, and you don't have all of these like touristy special things like this super great lookout that you can go to and all of that stuff, right? So there's a lot of potential for increasing tourism in Vilcabamba, is basically my point. I think just out of Loja, on the weekend here it gets really busy, but there's not a ton of stuff to do, right? Like, there are some things to do. You can go, like I said, horseback riding, you can go biking, there's some hikes. But if there were more like touristy stuff, like people go to El Mexicano for like tourism, right? Because people dressed as Mexicans, there's Mexican music and Mexican food, and that's like a touristy thing for Lojanos to do on the weekend. It's just like a restaurant, but it's like a cool spot. So because there's not a lot of options, So anyways, if you're into tourism, I think Vilcabamba, as it continues to grow, as it's more on the map, as more people relocate here, but also just the local tourism, which is actually mostly what Vilcabamba has, is local tourism. Most of it's local, almost all of it, yeah. There are backpackers and things, but mostly the tourism comes from all over Ecuador, so there's some opportunities there as well. Absolutely. If anybody wants to build a golf course, I got the spot picked out. A lot of money to be made on the real estate side of that. Reach out. Love to talk to you.
Yeah,
Good.
not a bad idea. No, that's another good one actually.
Yeah, like that's something I miss, playing
Yeah.
golf.
Yeah.
There's a few golf courses in the country, but none near us.
We got a little kids baseball league.
Yeah.
Not a league yet, but,
Not yet.
but if there was a little baseball, what do you call it, court, a baseball
Yeah,
field?
no, we need a lot of sports facilities, better
Sports
sports
facilities.
facilities for the kids.
Yeah,
That's stuff I'm looking forward to getting to through the charity,
right.
especially especially the sports facilities for the kids and some of those leagues. Yeah. All right, guys, if you made it this far, thank you. Please put a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell. I don't know, Brandon's not here. The tagline is confusing.
We hope to see you here one day. So until then.
We'll see you next time.